Anyway, so I'm fighting this total scrub, and then suddenly in the neutral he throws out Kazuya's crouch dash 3 into 1-1-2, and I'm like, bro, what the hell is that flowchart doing a launch punishable string when you're already -5? Anyway, so I launch punish his ass, then I go straight into heat, then I use my heat smash and then my heat dash.
Now I have no clue what this guy is going on about. If only someone would make a video explaining all these weird words that you hear in Tekken.
Hey Tekken players, I hope you're all doing well. Since this is my first video I've made for Tekken 8, let me quickly introduce myself to any new viewers. My name is Master and my channel is all around helping players take their first steps into trying to get better at Tekken by basically understanding the game as a whole and evolving from the casual gamer status into players who want to take their game to the next level. Now, I'm no pro, but I do know what it's like to struggle in the low ranks, and what you need to work on to get out of these beginner ranks, and to begin to grow as a Tekken player. I have a big catalogue that I've made for Tekken 7 including frames and sidestep guides, and have a lot of upcoming videos in the pipeline for Tekken 8. So no doubt you've been looking at other Tekken guides and videos and you've heard all sorts of weird words that Tekken nerds like me throw around and honestly have no clue what the hell we're going on about. I mean, what the hell is a whiff punish, and do I need to turn on my private browsing before I Google it? Well, fear not, I'm going to take you through 10 weird words Tekken players like to use and explain them to you in plain English. So with all that out of the way, let's crack on with it. Right, so this isn't a weird code that Tekken players have just made up. This is a universal system that's used in other fighting games and it refers to the buttons on your controller or arcade stick. So if we were looking at a PlayStation pad, it would be the following. 1 equals square, 2 equals triangle, 3 equals cross, and 4 equals circle. So you may ask, why don't we just use these words instead? Well, as I mentioned, it comes from the arcade days which predates the PlayStation era, not to mention other controllers like Xbox, etc. So using numbers just keeps it universal. When players mention things like 1 plus 2 or 2 plus 4, they're not trying to test you with mental arithmetic. This is simply a means of referring to pressing more than one button at the same time. So 2 plus 3, which is a universal heat burst, it means pressing triangle and cross at the same time. So while standing is a universal transition and it's a stance your character does going from crouch back to standing. So when you let go of the D-pad or the arcade stick lever and they go back to standing. During this stance you have access to moves that your character can't do when either standing or crouching. Its main function is when you block either a low or you go under a high and you want to land a move on your opponent for free as a punishment. Now, fun nerdy fact, the reason why in Tekken it's called while standing and not while rising is because when you use the short version, if it was while rising then this would be WR, but in Tekken we already have a WR for while running, so it's called while standing to make it WS for short. Now this is potentially a massive topic and I will be making a full guide for Tekken 8 very soon, so be sure to hit the sub button to not miss it. And there's now a link to my Tekken 7 frame guide, which will give you about 95% of the information, but to keep it short and sweet for now, in Tekken, when we talk about frames, we're talking about a measure of time, where 1 frame equals 1/60th of a second. This is not to do with the frames displayed on your monitor, by the way, but it's got to do with how the game is running in the background. So probably the easiest way to show this move is 10 frames fast, and this move is 60 frames fast. Along with measuring the frames or speed of how fast the move is, there's also frames that are available on hit or on block. This takes us to the next word. So as mentioned, if you throw out a move and your opponent blocks it, there's a certain amount of time before you can go back to blocking yourself. Now the TLDR version, if a move is -10 frames or more on block, then the other player can land the move in retaliation for free, which is why it's referred to as a punish. With some big low sweeps, the animation makes it very obvious. Generally speaking, big launches are quite negative on block and can be punished hard if you block them. Again, stay tuned or feel free to rewatch my frames guide for more details. Quite easy this, a whiff is when a move is thrown out but it doesn't land on the other player. The whiff refers to the imaginary noise it would make. So for example, if someone tried to throw an uppercut at you and you avoided it by leaning back, the opponent's fist would whiff through the air. Now when it comes to a whiff punish, this is when the move whiffs in your face and you're quick enough to hit them back before they can block. This is a fundamental skill in Tekken, but it does take some skill to create space by either sidestepping or backdashing to make the opponent whiff in the first place. Flowcharting in this case is not what middle management use to try and justify their otherwise pointless job roles with clever graphs and buzzwords. Obviously I'm not speaking from personal experience here. Anyway, flowcharting in Tekken is when you do a lot of predetermined moves into each other without really thinking about why or what you're doing, in the hope that it will just magically work. Now in a lot of cases it's actually very effective, and if the flowchart is strong enough then it will score you a lot of wins. To give it just a few examples, with Paul, some classic flowcharts are quad circle forward 1 into down forward 2, forward 2-1 into down forward 2, and of course the absolute classic down forward 2 into down forward 2. With Leroy, the flowchart is usually just pretty much any safe move into a parry. Now in general, flowcharting is looked down upon because if you only rely on flowcharting to win and your opponent soon clocks onto them, you now have nothing left to beat them, and it's also considered a bit brain dead because you're not really thinking about what you're doing or just adapting, you're just doing stuff and hoping for the best. Now that all being said, and just for a bit of balance, some characters that have a very long move list that go into different stances do rely on flowcharting by design, Hoang being a prime example, so flowcharting is also a legit way of playing the game in certain situations. No, this is not a Ned Flanders shorthand. Oki in Tekken is short for Okizeme. Okizeme is a name used for what happens when your opponent is knocked down to the ground and they're not back up on their feet. Let me demonstrate this with King. When he lands a Shining Wizard, notice that King gets up before the opponent, and they're lying right at his feet. This is an Oki situation that works in King's favour, because if King now does a down forward 4, this move beats out every single option that the grounded opponent tries to do, including trying to get up kick, spring kick or wake up kick. The only way the grounded opponent avoids this down forward 4 is to not move at all. But obviously, if they don't move at all, then this happens. So this is just one example of literally hundreds of potential Oki situations, and it's worth mentioning that some characters' designs are built around a strong Oki game, for example Kazuya and Yoshimitsu being two prime candidates.
And it defines his ground game. Knocks you down, steel pedal, if you try and stay on the ground, it's gonna backflip you on the ground and set you up for more disgusting vortex.
Just before explaining the neutral, this is not to be confused with a neutral input. A neutral input is when there's no direction pressed on the D-pad or arcade stick, and in Tekken this is highlighted by this star symbol. The neutral is a much deeper and profound subject, but in short, the neutral is generally speaking the state during an individual round where no player has an advantage at that exact moment. So what does this mean? Well, generally it means that both players are on their feet, no one has any significant frame advantage over the other. So what tends to happen in the neutral game is that players will size each other out with small pokes and jabs and side steps, basically looking for an opening to either start their pressure or land a launch or a knockdown. Now just to be clear, this is regardless of who has the most health. You could still be in the neutral with one player down 90%, it's more of a state of the positions of the players and the characters. Probably also worth mentioning that in low ranks, the neutral is more or less doesn't exist, as everyone is just mashing or trying to land launches like a madman. It's ironic that the higher the skill of the players, the less crazy the game might actually look, because to the untrained eye, these small pokes and jabs are, well, kind of nothing, but the reality is, this is high level Tekken and it's a beautiful thing to watch once you get your head around it.
Oh! What a whiff punish!
So this is a big one, and it will deserve its own video which I'll get round to making. A new mechanic for Tekken 8, Heat, is when your character goes into a hyper state where a lot of their moves get seriously buffed and it's possible to recover health and chipping down your opponent, even if they're blocking. During Heat you also have access to a move known as a Heat Smash that you can only do once in Heat, and after you use it, your Heat bar will be gone. As I mentioned, I will probably produce a guide on the Heat state, but just so we've covered all the terms, we have the following. Heat Engager. This is when you land a move that automatically puts you in heat and your opponent is knocked back so far that they can only really either hold, guard or duck. If they try and throw out a move, chances are it will come out too slow to stop the onslaught. Heat Burst. This is when you manually engage your heat mode. Note that you don't get the free running mix-up, and you now only have half a bar compared to landing a heat engager, which is when you get a full bar. Heat Dash. These are certain moves that become launchers during the heat state, so you can either launch your opponent or use them to extend an existing combo. And finally, Heat Smash. As already mentioned, a single powerful move that you can only do once in the heat state. They don't launch, but the damage is significant. These are quite similar to the old Rage Drive systems in Tekken 7. Finally, we have Scrubs. Now, depending on who you talk to, some people think that if you've never got into an EVO top 8, then you're definitely a scrub. Some people think that if you have the audacity to point out that some characters have a lot of cheese and cheap gimmicks, then you're a scrub. And if you're a Mishima player, you think that anyone who can't wave you into Dash Electric is definitely a scrub. So, all jokes aside, it's a term used to describe in a negative way someone who's not very good at the game for some reason. Hopefully this kind of elitism mentality will die out when the wholesome message behind a lot of the arcade quests of Tekken hate starts to sink in. Also, always worth pointing out, if you lose to someone and call them a scrub, probably worth reflecting on what exactly that makes you. Okay, well that's 10 terms that now hopefully you understand. Now there's lots more, but I didn't want to make this video too long, but if this video gets enough likes and views, I'll certainly make a follow up. Which terms and jargon have you got confused about in Tekken, or would you like explaining next? Please drop a comment below and we'll see if we can get into the next video. Thanks guys and girls and fellow scrubs, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.